Ask Tom on Home Show.
Mary Ann from League City, Texas needs some insulation advice.
Yeah, she's remodeling her kitchen, and they're going down to the studs, Tom. Mary Ann writes to us, I have a brick veneer, and I'm getting varying advice on re-insulating between the studs. Do I use house wrap or don't I use house wrap? The old felt is pretty well gone, so do I replace it with a newer product that'll still provide an air gap between the brick and the insulation? I hear up north you need a vapor barrier, but not here. I'm very confused. Can you help her out, Tom?
Yeah, vapor barriers, first off, let's dismiss that very quickly. It's not used down here in the Houston area, in the Gulf Coast regions. Vapor barriers have a very specific reason to be used up north where you have freezing weather. It's used behind the sheetrock, so when you get into freezing times and you're heating the inside of your home, hot air holds more water than cold, and it wants to migrate through the walls. And so it'll get to a point where it'll freeze. It'll become ice in a wall. If you have that vapor barrier, it holds all the moisture in the house, which in northern climates where it's cold, it's very important. So forget the vapor barrier. House wraps are, they're just moisture barriers. They let the water drip off, but they let the vapor transfer back and through. So a moisture barrier is used primarily down here, as well as other parts of the country too, to control infiltration. But here's what you're going to have. You have to have a airspace behind the brick and the framing. You cannot pack insulation against it. If you do that, you're going to cause a huge amount of problems down the road. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I want to really tell you don't do it because water will get back there and you want it to bead down and go out the weep holes because brick is not watertight. It'll come through. So you want to hold the insulation into the cavity of the wall and not let it overflow into that airspace. And by taking moisture barrier, house wrap, and just curling it inside the studs and stapling it down each side, it becomes almost like a baffle that holds it in and keeps it from expanding out because insulation can get all unruly and go all over the place. Then you pack your insulation in and go ahead and finish up the wall. And it'll work fine that way, but keep it out of that airspace against the brick. During
the Harvey, we had a lot of well-intentioned people went and mucked out houses, and they pulled a lot of that barrier out
exterior
of houses.
gypsum, all the sheathing package that were in there. They were yanking it out from the inside.
Right. And like you say, you have to have something that creates that airspace in there. So if that's the case, Tom, how do you do that? Because, I mean, normally that would have been put in before they put the brick up, right?
I know, and that's why I say you curl it to the inside of the studs and staple down so it's just like a little barrier in each side of the stud cavities. That just keeps the insulation from falling into that airspace there. What happened with Harvey was a lot of very good people went into homes to do the demolition through support groups and church groups and things like that. And they weren't really led properly, so they were making some very bad, hasty mistakes, which cost people down the road a lot of problems. And so they should have let those areas dry out, pull all the insulation out, the sheetrock. You know, the good stuff on the inside, I mean, the stuff on the inside could have gone, but you leave the other stuff and let it dry out. They would have been better off. And I also found, which I'm kind of a part of with the Texas State Guard, but at the same time, I think sometimes people overstep their authority. There were a lot of FEMA people telling people to do that, which was a real mistake. And I work with FEMA, and I've got some certifications with FEMA, quite a few because of my background. But they need to not do that because that was bad information too, which I really got a little upset about. Only personally, I didn't let it out too much, but I just like to warn people. But in this case, it's simple. Wrap it on the inside, put the insulation in, and put your house back together because there's not much else you can do. Think about it. That felt has been gone a long time, so it's only going to be better than what it was.
Well, Tom, when you put that in, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So if I get a big old roll of Tyvek, right, and I'm down to the studs, I run it over and around the studs and over and around them. So I'm essentially wrapping this
in strips.
Ah, that's the point I was getting to.
Okay, and then it's going to be a couple inches longer than the width, usually 16 inches or so. So you're going to cut it about 18-inch strips, and you're going to bring it in and just curl it in and use a staple gun down either side.
Okay.
So it kind of curls and attaches to the sides of the stud. Even if you can only go a few feet at a time, just overlap it, go from the top down. It'll be fine.
And not labor intensive at all.
No, and it's not heavy work. Well, but it's not.
It's
heavy
a pain in
work.
the neck work. Yeah, it's gonna take time.
It is. A lot of stuff to detail things is a pain in the neck. It's like anything.
That's why I stay away from detail. I'm more of a generalist.
Yeah, right.
That's why I trust Tom when I need help. And you can too. Go to HomeShowRadio.com, click on that blue Ask Tom button, and you know what'll happen? You fill out this form, you send us your question, and your video will wind up on here, just like this. We post a new video because Tom loves to help folk, so we post a new one every day at HomeShowRadio.com, our Facebook page, of course, on our YouTube channel.